Welcome back everyone to Gotcha Interact. We'll be taking a look at the second half of the 4.7 banners today. The first character we're going to be looking at is Furina. After that, the other character that is sharing a banner with her is Sigewinne. Let's go through both of these banners and see whether or not these characters are a good pulling option for you.
If you do enjoy the video, go ahead and like and subscribe and check out the rest of the channel for other videos you may be interested in. We do also have a Discord you can join where our members talk with each other and you can even talk with us. Now, onto the video.
The first character we want to talk about is Furina. Now, looking at Furina, considering she's already had her first banner before, we're going to be already kind of understanding how she works, but in general, when looking at her as a character, she's going to be ascending into crit rate, which as a kind of almost an on-field damage character that you're kind of using to buff other characters, but also do her own personal damage, ascending into crit rate is nice, especially with her weapon going to crit damage, which we'll talk about later. Now beyond that as well, looking at her different skills between her normal attack, her skill, and her burst talent, her normal attack talent you're not really going to want to touch until obviously you get to the C6. That's a completely different story, but you're not really going to want to be leveling into this too heavily, really, if at all. Looking at the skill though, that is where most of her damage is coming from. So Rift, what does her skill say?
Furina's skill is a lot of her kit and has a lot packed in one punch. Basically, she'll invite what she calls her Salon Solitaire members to come forth and aid in her little performance. So there actually are two different instances of how her skill works. You can have the Usia state, which is going to have the three little Hydro buddies kind of dealing damage on field or while Furina's off field. But then you also do have a Numa state, and the way you actually change between the Usia and Numa state is by using a charged attack with Furina. This will switch her between those states, and you can see because she even changes her visual appearance. So in the Usia state, like I said, she's going to have these three little Hydro buddies doing some off-field skill damage. That's going to be a lot of her personal damage, and they scale very well on her max HP. So these little guys, they're going to attack nearby opponents at intervals, prioritizing the target of the active character, dealing Hydro damage based on Furina's max HP. When they attack, if characters with more than 50% HP are nearby, the members will increase their current attack's power based on the number of such characters, and consume said character's HP. Now, if 1, 2, 3, or 4 characters meet these requirements, the members' attacks will deal 110%, 120%, 130%, or 140% of their original damage based on, like I said again, 1, 2, 3, or 4 characters that meet those requirements. Now, in her Numa state, this is a lot different. She's just going to have the Singer of Many Waters, which is just one summon, and this is just going to heal your nearby active character based on, once again, Furina's max HP. The only downside, I guess you could say to this is the fact that it doesn't heal the entire party at once. It only heals your on-field character.
Now taking a look at her burst, Furina is going to be creating a stage of foam that will deal AoE Hydro damage based on Furina's max HP and will cause nearby party members to enter the Universal Reverie state. During this time period in this state, when nearby party members' HP increases or decreases, one fanfare point will be granted to Furina for each percentage point of their max HP by which their HP will change. At the same time, Furina will increase the damage dealt by and incoming healing bonus of all of the nearby party members based on the amount of fanfare that she has. When the duration ends, Furina's fanfare points will be cleared until you create it again with another burst.
Alright, so now that we've talked a little bit about Furina and how she works, the next character we're going to be looking at is Sigewinne, the new character in this second half of 4.7. So I guess the first question that comes to a lot of people's mind is, what does Sigewinne actually do? What is her role in the game? And if you didn't already know, she is a healing type character. A lot of people kind of make the reference that she's basically Kokomi 2.0, but with a spin, because she does have some Bond of Life in her kit, and it does make her kind of unique and very interesting for sure. So once again, she will be the healer in your team, so if you know you don't need a healer, then Sigewinne right off the bat might not be a character you need to go for, and you can just save. But looking and taking a kind of a deeper dive into her kit, what does she actually do? Well, right off the bat, as a healer, she does ascend into HP percent because she uses her max HP as her scaling for most of her healing. But looking right into her skills, her normal attack isn't going to be crazy. She is a bow type character, so she does actually have a charge attack that is a little bit interesting. As you hold her aimed shot, you'll actually accumulate these Hydra bubbles that'll kind of go out, and they're called ministration bubbles. But that's really all that's interesting about her normal attack.
Looking at Sigewinne's skill, she will be blowing up a bolstering bubble bomb that will go towards enemies and will bounce between nearby opponents, dealing Hydro damage based on Sigewinne's max HP to different opponents that it hits. When it bounces, it will restore HP to all nearby party members except for Sigewinne herself. Now the amount healed, obviously like that Riff was talking about, is going to be based off of Sigewinne's max HP. After bouncing 5 different times, the Bowstring Bubble Bomb will disappear and restore HP to Sigewinne a different set of HP based on her own max HP value. Only one of these Bowstring Bubble Bombs can be created by Sigewinne at one time. Now, this also does have a hold version. That was a press version, and in the hold version, you can enter an aiming mode and begin to blow the bubble bomb even bigger than it can be before. The Bowstring Bubble Bomb will grow bigger and bigger the longer that the skill is held, until it grows up to 2 different tier sizes. Each tier it grows increases its damage by 5% and the healing that it will give by 5%. When a Bowstring Bubble Bomb bounces, it will drop down a tier in size when actually you release it until it returns back to the normal Bowstring Bubble Bomb size and keep going until its final duration. After weaker opponents are hit by this bigger Bowstring Bubble Bomb, they will be imprisoned and will be unable to move. Now, completely separate from both the press and the skill version, if you just use the skill at all, 2 source water droplets will be created near Sigewinne when she uses her skill. Each source water droplet Sigewinne will collect will grant her a bond of life worth 10% of her max HP. When Sigewinne's bond of life is cleared, she regains 1 elemental energy for every 2000 HP worth of the bond of life that she was just clearing. Sigewinne can regain up to 5 elemental energy in this way. This skill also has an Archie attached to it with Usia on the alignment.
Now taking a look at Sigewinne's burst, this is called Super Saturated Syringing. Sigewinne's going to take out a special Fortress of Meripede made syringe and assault the area in front of her with waves of kindness and medicine, dealing AoE hydro damage based on Sigewinne's max HP. In addition, Sigewinne will also absorb up to 2 nearby source water droplets within a certain range when she uses this skill, which, as we heard Vixen talk about, that's how you get the source water droplets, by using her skill. Now, the damage on this does look to be pretty good. If you have this skill crowned, you're looking at a 21.2% of her max HP damage multiplier. And this is going to last for 2.5 seconds that you'll have her on field once you use the burst. You're going to stay on field for 2.5 seconds and kind of just damage the area in front of you. And then it's going to go on cooldown for about 18 seconds with an energy cost of 70. So as a healing unit, this is pretty interesting because we already know that she's going to be a healer based on her max HP, but she also has this little bit of damage tied to her burst. So I think that'll be kind of interesting. She can be a little bit of damage for you as a quick swap with her burst, but she also is a good off-field healer. Before we move on to looking at the weapons on this banner, I did want to quickly look at Sigewinne's first passive because I did find it a little bit interesting. It's called Requires Appropriate Rest, and this just states that Sigewinne will grant herself the semi-strict bed rest effect for 18 seconds after using her skill. And once she does this semi-strict bed rest effect is basically giving Sigewinne an 8% hydro damage bonus and 10 stacks of convalescence. When the elemental skills of your nearby off-field party members other than Sigewinne deal damage, you're going to consume 1 stack of convalescence and increase the damage dealt by that instance of elemental skill damage. Now, every 1000 max HP Sigewinne has above 30,000 increases the damage by 80. And the maximum damage increase for elemental skills that can be gained in this way is 2,800. I don't know what this is going to look like as she, drops in game and whatnot, but this does seem interesting because she is explicitly upgrading and increasing the damage of off-field skill damage characters. So characters like Fischl, Yaimiko, Nahida, Furina, etc. Those characters are going to get a nice buff just from Sigewinne's first passive. So maybe in the later sections where we ask some questions about team setup, I think there's definitely a lot of interesting things that can be done with Sigewinne, and maybe she doesn't have to be tied to the whole bond of life thinking.
Losing the 50-50 is the worst feeling in Genshin. And I understand, believe me. That's why whenever I have nothing left and am in the dilemma of whether or not to spend, I use Loot Bar. Loot Bar is 100% safe and only requires your Genshin UID to purchase Genesis crystals. Normally, the price for me to buy 6,480 crystals is $100, but you can see here how Loot Bar has reduced the price to about $85, and if you're a new user, you get an additional 5% off. The way it works is that Loot Bar tops up your account through the official channel with Hoyoverse. After making a purchase, you can expect to receive it in 30 minutes or less. In my case, I received mine in just about 5 minutes. Another comforting thing about Loot Bar is that they are trustworthy and offer 24/7 live support. Other creators like Dukaja, Jello Impact, Superatom, Mujin, and Tevat Times have endorsed and used this product themselves, including both Vixen and myself. Just use the link in the description to get another discount on top of the already cheaper prices at purchase. Thank you Loot Bar for sponsoring today's video, and now, let's dive in.
Now taking a look over into the weapon banner, first looking at Splendor of the Tranquil Waters, which is the weapon that is specifically made for Furina. Now with a crit damage main stat at 88.2% at level 90, this weapon is really good, never mind just for Furina, but specifically looking at its ability, when the equipping character's current HP increases or decreases, elemental skill damage dealt will be increased by 8% for 6 seconds, which has a max of 3 stacks, which can obviously bring you up to 24%. And this effect can be triggered once every 0.2 seconds. When other party members' current HP increases or decreases, the equipping character's max HP will be increased by 14% for 6 seconds, and this has a max of 2 stacks going up to 28%. This effect can be triggered once every 0.2 seconds, and the aforementioned effects can be triggered even if the wielder is off field. Now, looking at this here, obviously we already have a good ability, and we have some great, obviously the main stat with the 88.2% crit damage, which is extremely nice, tying itself actually with Light of Foliar Incision at the max level. But in general, looking here, you're probably not going to really be putting this on a different character. Now, the crit damage is extremely good, and like I said, other things like Light of Foliar Incision also have a high amount of crit damage, which make it nice and useful for other teams and other characters that could use it. But with Splendor, it's very difficult to maybe put on a different character unless you're trying to just go with a high amount of skill damage. But by doing so, the only way that you're actually getting these different changes is by having anybody in the party really decrease their HP. So to get that elemental skill damage increase, you need to have the character who's using the Splendor of Tranquil Waters to have their HP increased or decreased. And then as well, with the other party members increasing or decreasing their HP, the equipping character's max HP will be increased. So not only do you need this weapon to have it's a nice amount of crit damage and whatnot, but you need to have your characters as well as other characters constantly changing their HP, and that could be useful for some, just healing in general by taking some hits. But also the thing that could be a little bit of the downfall is by having your other party members kind of changing their HP. If it's not on Furina, is, obviously having that HP increase, which trying to find, the right character for that is going to be a little bit difficult. So the ability really does just stick themselves right to Furina. So the only time that you'd really be going after this weapon is for Furina herself.
Also, on the other half of the weapon banner, there is Sigewinne's weapon, which is called Silvershower Heartstrings. Now, this weapon at level 90 is going to be giving you a main stat of 66.2% HP, which does remind me a lot of Nilou's weapon, because those are at this point, well, once this bow releases, those two weapons will be the only two weapons that, being 5 stars, go into HP. Looking at the ability on this weapon, it states that the equipping character can gain the remedy effect. When they possess 1, 2, or 3 remedy stacks, max HP will be increased by 12% for 1 stack, 24% for 2 stacks, and 40% for all 3 remedy stacks. 1 stack may be gained when the following conditions are met. So the first condition is 1 stack for 25 seconds when using an elemental skill. Very simple. The next stack can be gained for 25 seconds when the value of a Bond of Life value increases, which we know Sigewinne does give herself her own Bond of Life, so that should be pretty straightforward when used on Sigewinne. And then the third condition is you're going to gain 1 stack for 20 seconds for performing healing. Also, pretty simple, especially for a character like Sigewinne. Now, these stacks can still be triggered when the equipping character is not on the field, which is going to be very nice, and each stack's duration is counted independently. In addition, when 3 stacks are active, Elemental Burst crit rate will be increased by 28%. Yes, this is Refinement 1, and that's pretty nice crit rate increase right there. This effect will be cancelled 4 seconds after falling under 3 stacks. Once again, though, when looking at all these stacks that I had talked about, these all work off of each other independently, and I think it's still going to be very easy, especially on Sigewinne, to have these, because you're either supposed to have an increase to Bond of Life, or you're healing someone, or you're just using the skill. So as long as one of those things is happening, they'll kind of keep each other, those uptimes will kind of stay alive for you, and you're going to be getting a lot of HP increase, which, why is that good on Sigewinne? Well, as we talked about, her healing skills on her HP, but also her burst damage skills on her HP. And not only that, this weapon is giving crit rate to that. So I think there is potential, especially with Sigewinne having her weapon, her burst can have some damage potential because you're already getting a lot of crit rate help. So you can focus a little bit more on your max HP for the healing side of things. Now, as far as other characters go, there's not a lot obviously that would be good for this. I mean, you can argue for maybe Yelan because Yelan does scale on HP, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem like the most optimal option. I still think you can get away with it just because you are getting burst crit rate, but the whole thing is Yelan doesn't heal. She doesn't give Bond of Life to herself. So you actually can't get this crit rate for Yelan because she can't do any of that thing. The only way you get that burst crit rate by 28% is by having all 3 of those conditions met, right? So only a character who can get Bond of Life can heal and uses an elemental skill. And that really only is held to Sigewinne. She's the only Bond of Life character that actually heals other characters as well. We know Arlecchino and Cloran don't do that. So obviously, I think this weapon is only tied to Sigewinne, and you should only be looking at this weapon if you know you want Sigewinne, or let's say you're just trying to pull Furina's weapon, which I can resonate with that because I have Furina, I don't have Furina's weapon, and I'm going to be trying my luck for Splendor of Tranquil Waters. So I just have to know and realize that with the possibility of getting this weapon, this would probably secure me for Sigewinne. And if I don't want to get Sigewinne, then I just have to know that this weapon's basically useless on my account. So I think that is something to kind of keep in mind. It is an HP bow, so yes, you can maybe throw it on an HP scaling bow character, but once again, the passive becomes very, very useless.
Now going into the next part of our video where we're going to be talking about the summary, just putting some questions together. And the first question we always talk about with these Toponauticals is, do you need either character on your account? What elements or roles is your account in need of? And who else fills this role, as one kind of big question. Now, first looking at first and foremost Furina, for do you need the character on your account? Now, Furina, I think, is probably one of the best supports in the game that we have right now. Not only is she a great buffer, but she can be a healer as well as just, helping a lot of teammates damage, as well as she can put out damage on her own, as well as, like I said before, she's going to be doing damage, she's going to be healing kind of characters as well. She can switch to a healing mode, and she can be buffing. So she kind of fills a lot of roles that you would want out of a sub DPS, just a support for your main DPS character. So I do think that she's extremely useful on an account, and kind of like how the most desired maybe to pull characters in the game right now for DPS are Neuvillette, Arlecchino, and possibly characters like Alhaitham and Raiden and other things like that. Whereas when you're looking at supports, some of the best support characters are Kazuha, Nahida, and Furina. And maybe we're going to be getting some of the characters that are going to be extremely good, but I think Furina right now is probably very high on a lot of people's accounts to really go for. So if you don't have her, and you already have a few DPS that can work extremely well with her, which she can kind of help everybody, then I think that it's a great idea to go on and pull for her. Looking at Sigewinne for do you need the character on your account, I don't necessarily think that Sigewinne is necessary, especially if you already have some healers on your account. If you're not looking for a healer, Sigewinne's probably not the character for you. Now, besides this, if you have Cloran, it's probably a good idea to try to maybe go after Sigewinne. Now, they are a few weeks apart, so it's kind of maybe difficult to maybe pull for her, but I think that obviously these two characters are going to be extremely good together. Never mind putting Furina in that team as well could be a nice solid upgrade. Now, in general, when you're looking at both these characters for what elements or roles is your account in need of, I already kind of talked about kind of healing and then support roles. So if you need Hydra on your account, this is a great time to look for it, as well as especially supports. But if you're looking for maybe some other things, then obviously this is a full Hydro side right now, so don't pull if you have way too much Hydro. Who else kind of fits this role? I think there are some characters like I was talking about before that could kind of fill the role for Furina. There are plenty of buffers already out there. If you're looking for a buff attack in that type of sense, you can go for Bennett. There's some other characters that can buff certain things, and so it kind of just depends on what you need. But the great thing about Furina is that she can buff all types of damage no matter what it is, so that's why she's extremely useful. Now, Sigewinne, on the other hand, is a little bit easier to maybe slot in and slot out, and maybe not necessarily need to pull for her, considering that she is a healer and does help mainly with a lot of Bond of Life changes, but she is an extremely good healer probably. It seems like that's going to be your main necessary goal. So if you have plenty of healers on your account and you're not looking for another healer, you're looking for another damage character, or you're looking for another great support, Sigewinne's probably not for you.
Our next question is, what kinds of teams are you trying to build? And looking straight at Furina, she can pretty much be used in virtually any team just because of the universal damage buff she does give. And she can be used as a healer, technically speaking, if you maybe don't care about her off-field skill damage with her Usia alignment and you need an emergency heal, she can provide that. So, and maybe in a riskier sense, if or maybe you're just a newer player, I think Furina's always a good pull. She's just one of those characters I don't think you can go wrong with because she can help basically anybody. And her off-field skill damage is very, very good. Just put a lot of HP on her, get a somewhat decent crit, and you're going to be dealing a lot of damage, even without her weapon. Looking at Sigewinne, like Vixen was stating, if you already have a healer, especially a 5-star healer like Kokomi or Baiju, I would probably heavily advise to just save and skip this character, unless you just really like the character. Maybe you've been waiting for Sigewinne since Fontaine dropped. Then okay, I can understand that. You've been wanting this character, go for it. But if you're thinking about what's meta, what's going to be best for my account, especially going into Natlin, with Sigewinne being a healer and also working with Bond of Life, at least I'm going to say this, I don't expect we're going to get any more Bond of Life characters in Natlin. Now, that could be wrong, but it just doesn't seem that way. Like, we're going to be getting new mechanic type stuff, right? We're going to be getting a lot, maybe attacks related stuff because it's Pyro. Or there's just going to be a whole new thing that they're trying to introduce. My point is, once again, I think if you have Kokomi, Baiju, don't pull Sigewinne. She basically does the same thing at the end of the day as a good healer.
Looking at the last question for this section, we are talking about, do you need either of the weapons? Now, personally, both of these weapons, and we've kind of already touched on this while talking about the weapons section, I don't feel like either of these weapons are going to be extremely necessary for the characters or even for other characters as well, besides the characters they're kind of meant for. Splendor of Tranquil Waters is a great weapon, especially for Furina, so if you can get it and you already have it, that's great. Going after Furina, it's a very good idea. But going after this weapon is really not necessary. Furina can use a lot of other 4-star and even 5-star weapons that will help her and benefit her in different areas. It's not necessary really to pull the 5-star weapon, and in my personal opinion, I think most of the time, if you're getting a 5-star character, the only characters that I think it's more necessary than others, if I really had to choose to pull 5-star weapons, is to go after DPS characters' weapons first, and then look at supports. Now, that then comes to the next side of things, looking at Silvershower Heartstrings. It's got a good main stat of HP %, but beyond that, that's kind of where it stops. You know, you're going to need some other things, like Riff was talking about. It doesn't really seem like it's going to be that great for other characters besides Sigewinne. And there's plenty of different bows that Sigewinne could use that are 4 stars and once again 5 stars as well that could be used in place of this weapon. And I don't really think that either of these weapons are going to be extremely necessary, so pulling on this weapon banner is probably a no-go for me for most characters, even if you have the characters.
Next, looking and talking about the constellation value of these characters and kind of weighing the dangers that can be seen in this based on maybe you're a free-to-play player, maybe you're a new player, or maybe you've been here since day one and your decisions don't really matter at this point. You have everything on your account that you need, right? So looking at these constellations, are these characters worth at C0 in the first place? Or maybe if you do already have them, as a C1 versus the C2, what's actually good there? Which is the better one to go for? Questions like that. So with Furina, looking right at Furina's first 2 constellations, I think at this point a lot of us understand and know that her first 2 constellations are very good, both of them. So her first one just states that when using Let the People Rejoice, Furina will gain 150 fanfare. That is her burst. And additionally, Furina's fanfare limit is increased by 100. So essentially what this is doing is immediately giving you a lot of fanfare to work with instead of having to work it up by changing all the HP, decreasing, and then healing it back. So you immediately get to start out with having a pretty considerable buff. And then on top of that, your limit how much fanfare you can get being increased is essentially saying that you have more damage potential because you can get more now. So essentially, you're just increasing the damage of your entire team because once again, Furina's burst is increasing everyone's damage because it's all about HP change, and Furina's changing everyone's HP, and as long as you have a team-wide healer, you're healing everyone's HP change back. So this is a very good constellation. I would at least consider, if you already have Furina, it's a very good one to have. Her C2 just states that while the burst lasts, Furina's fanfare gain from increases or decreases in nearby characters' HP is increased by 250%. Basically just making the HP increase and decrease a lot more marginally bigger. Each point of fanfare above the limit will increase Furina's max HP by 0.35%. Now her maximum HP increase will be 140%. By increasing Furina's HP, that's heavily increasing her damage, which is insanely good. I mean, I just use a 4-star weapon on my Furina. I don't have her weapon yet, and my Furina typically hits anywhere between 16 to 28,000 damage on all those individual off-field skill hits. I mean, her damage is quite insane. And also, by changing and greatly increasing that margin of HP change, the reason why that's so good is because when Furina decreases HP on other characters, and that HP is also healed by other characters. The way Furina gives her buff is based on the percentage of HP change. It's not based on did she change 100 HP versus 1,000. It's all based on did she change 10% or 20% of the HP. So even if you have an unleveled character, let's just say for sake of understanding in theory here, if you have a level 40 character, obviously like most level 40 characters have only a couple thousand HP or something like that, right? If Furina is decreasing by 1,000, that's almost half health of said character, but that's still a 50% change in HP. So that's still going to be 50% per se of fanfare stack increase. So it's all based on the percentage of change, not how much did she actually take away or how much was actually healed. So that's why this constellation is going to be very good, just because it's heavily increasing that margin of change. As far as which one to go for, I will just go ahead and say this. Furina doesn't really need her constellations. Once again, she's just a character that's so incredibly powerful at C0. She is the former Archon of Fontaine and whatnot. So, like, it does make sense being one of the characters of that type. She's very powerful. So she doesn't need these constellations. Like, I have C0 and she's very, very powerful once again. But C1's going to greatly increase, and I think you can't stop there. That's a very good damage increase across the board for any team you place her in, because you're just getting that immediate damage buff, as well as having higher potential to get even more. And C2 is also good. If you still want to keep going, C2 is really good too. So I think it's a very easy character to kind of, you can either sit with one copy, you can sit with 2 copies, but even 3 copies, it only gets better. There's not like the C1's bad and the C2's good, so it's like all or nothing. I think whatever you have to work with, if you have extra Primogems before Natlin and you do want to spend them, you can't go wrong here. Now quickly looking at Sigewinne's constellations. First off, having her at C0, like we've already stated all across the video, if you already have a healer, then she's probably not worth. But if you did pull Sigewinne and you're thinking about constellations, let's look at those real quick. Her first constellation states that Rebound Hydrotherapy's Bolstering Bubble Bomb can bounce 3 extra times, and the first 3 bounces will not cause the bigger bubble bombs to become smaller. Now also the passive talent requires appropriate rest, which is her first talent that I actually did talk about in the Sigewinne section, becomes enhanced, and it states this now. Each bubble bomb bounce adds 1 stack to her convalescence tally, and the values for the convalescence stack's damage bonus will be modified to every 1000 max HP Sigewinne has above 30,000 increases the damage by 100, whereas before it was 80. The maximum damage increase for elemental skills that can be gained in this way is now 3,500, whereas before it was 2,800. Also, you must first unlock this first passive talent, requires appropriate rest. So essentially what this first constellation is doing all in all is giving more of an elemental skill damage bonus to all of your off-field skill damage dealers. And once again, characters like Nahida, Furina, etc. You're also going to be able to cause that bigger bubble bomb to bounce 3 extra times, and with those first 3 bounces not decreasing in size, you can essentially have more crowd control over those smaller enemies by imprisoning even more. Looking at her C2, this just states that when using the skill and the burst, Sigewinne can create a bubbly shield worth 30% of her max HP that absorbs hydro damage with 250% efficiency. The bubbly shield will persist until Sigewinne finishes using relevant skills. So no, this will not last even after switching off of Sigewinne. And, you know, like I'm thinking in the burst sense. When you go to use Sigewinne's burst, it applies this bubbly shield. But once the burst is over, then that shield's going to go away. So it's just giving her a lot of interruption resistance and some ways to not, you know, take damage. I think the interruption resistance is going to be good here, though. Additionally, after Rebound Hydrotherapy's Bolstering Bubble Bomb or Super Saturated Syringing hits an opponent, that opponent's hydro resistance will be decreased by 35% for 8 seconds. And that right there, folks, is what I think is the main takeaway of her C2 being pretty good. This is going to be very good if you're throwing Sigewinne, not just, you know, her obviously doing some personal damage from her burst, but if you're throwing her in a team that's a lot of hydro damage focus, so Furina, which has natural synergy with Sigewinne, but also Nervalette, a character like that, really would like this. I mean, we're talking 35% resistance decrease is a lot. A resistance decrease is usually always better than just a damage bonus, because when you take away resistance, you're not only giving a buff theoretically and technically, you're removing defense stat from that opponent, which always is like double the amount of just giving a 35% hydro damage bonus. So as far as these two constellations go, the C2 does seem to have a little bit more of an edge over the first one, just once again for that hydro resistance decrease. But the caveat being that's only for hydro damage, right? The first constellation kind of increases all your other characters' skill damage, so that can be a little bit more universal for characters like Fischl, Yai, even Shiori could be brought up there too. Just it's all about the skill damage, dealing more damage. So C1 seems a little bit more universal. So if you do want to look at constellations, the C1's not bad, and the C2 is pretty good for your Hydro teams. But all in all, I don't think the constellations are going to be worth at all. I think just one copy of the character is enough. We hope that this video could help you decide on whether these characters or weapons coming up on the next banner are for you.
As always, if you have any suggestions that may help other players, go ahead and let us know down in the comments. Make sure to like, subscribe, and make sure to check out our Discord as well. Thank you again for watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one.